Jake Collins saw the fire in the sky before he heard the sound. He was sitting outside his small shelter, eating dried meat and watching the twin moons rise over the mountains. Then the night turned bright orange, and a terrible screaming noise filled the air. A ship was falling. Not just any ship. This was a big one, the kind that crossed between stars. Jake had been alone on this planet for 3 years, ever since his own small cargo vessel broke down beyond repair. He had stopped hoping for rescue long ago, but he had never stopped watching the sky. The burning ship disappeared behind the eastern ridge. A few seconds later, the ground shook, and a column of smoke rose into the darkness. Jake stood up slowly. His heart was beating fast. Someone had crashed. Someone might be alive. He went inside his shelter and grabbed his pack. He filled it with medical supplies, water, and a knife. He put on his thick coat because the nights on this world were cold enough to kill. Then he started walking toward the smoke dot. It took him 2 hours to reach the crash site. The forest was dense and dark, full of strange sounds and stranger shadows. Jake had learned to move carefully through these woods. There were animals here that hunted at night, and some of them were dangerous. But tonight, he moved faster than usual. If anyone had survived that crash, they would not survive long in this cold without help. The ship had torn a long path through the forest before it finally stopped. Trees were broken and burning. Pieces of metal were scattered everywhere. Jake had never seen a ship like this before. The design was strange, with smooth curves and a silver-blue color that seemed to glow even in the darkness. This was not a human ship. Jake felt fear then. Aliens. He had heard stories about the different species that lived among the stars, but he had never met any of them. Humans were still new to space travel, still learning their place in a galaxy full of older civilizations. Some of those civilizations were friendly. Some were not. He almost turned back. But then he heard a sound. A soft, weak cry coming from somewhere in the wreckage. Jake moved closer. He found the first body near the front of the ship. It was tall, at least 7 feet, with silver skin and dark violet markings across its face and arms. The eyes were closed, and the chest was not moving. Dead. Jake had never seen this species before, but he recognized death in any form. He found more bodies as he searched. 5 in total, all the same species, all wearing what looked like military uniforms. They had been thrown from the ship when it broke apart. None of them were breathing. The cry came again, weaker this time. Jake followed the sound to a section of the ship that was mostly intact. The door was jammed, but he found a gap in the metal wall and squeezed through. Inside, the ship was dark, except for a few emergency lights that flickered red and orange. Jake moved carefully, stepping over broken equipment and twisted metal. The air smelled like smoke and something else, something sweet and unfamiliar. He found her in what looked like a private room. She was lying on the floor, half buried under a fallen beam. Her skin was the same silver as the others, but her markings were different, more elaborate. Swirling patterns of deep purple that covered her face and neck. She was smaller than the dead crew members and younger, though Jake had no way of knowing how old she actually was. Her eyes were closed, and silver blood was pooling beneath her body. But her chest was moving, barely. She was alive. Jake knelt beside her and carefully lifted the beam off her body. She cried out in pain, a sound that needed no translation. He checked her wounds as gently as he could. There was a deep cut on her side, and her left arm was bent at a bad angle, probably broken. He did not know enough about her biology to guess what other injuries she might have, but he knew she would die if she stayed here. "Can you hear me?" he asked. Her eyes opened. They were golden bright and strange, like nothing Jake had ever seen. She looked at him with confusion and fear. Her mouth moved, but the words she spoke were in a language he did not understand. "I'm going to help you," Jake said. He spoke slowly, hoping she might understand his tone, if not his words. "I'm going to pick you up now. It's going to hurt, but I need to get you somewhere warm." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. Jake lifted her as carefully as he could. She was lighter than he expected, but she was still tall, and carrying her through the forest would not be easy. She made a small sound of pain when he started moving, then fell silent. Her head rested against his shoulder, and her eyes closed. The walk back to his shelter took almost 3 hours. Jake's arms burned with the effort, and his legs ached from the cold. Several times he had to stop and rest, laying the alien woman down on the frozen ground and checking to make sure she was still breathing. Each time, she was. Barely. The temperature was dropping fast. On this planet, the nights could reach 40 degrees below zero. Jake knew that if he did not reach shelter soon, they would both die. He kept walking. When he finally saw the dim light of his shelter, Jake almost cried with relief. He pushed through the door and laid the alien woman on his bed, the only bed he had. He turned the heating unit to maximum and started working on her wounds. He cleaned the cut on her side and wrapped it tightly with bandages. Her blood was silver and warm, and it stained his hands as he worked. He set her broken arm as best he could, using pieces of metal from his supply kit to make a rough splint. He did not know if he was doing it right. He did not know anything about her body or her biology. He only knew that he had to try. When he had done everything he could, Jake sat down on the floor beside the bed and watched her breathe. Outside, the wind was howling, and the temperature was still falling. The heating unit hummed and struggled against the cold. He had no idea who she was or where she had come from. He did not know if she was dangerous or friendly, if her people would thank him for saving her or punish him for touching her. He only knew that she was alive because of him, and that for the first time in 3 years, he was not alone. Jake leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes. Tomorrow, he would have questions. Tonight, he just needed to rest. The alien woman slept, and Jake watched over her until the moon set and the first light of dawn began to color the sky. The alien woman had a fever. Jake could tell because her skin, which had been cool and smooth when he first found her, was now hot to the touch. Her body was fighting something, maybe infection, maybe the shock of her injuries. He did not know enough about her species to understand what was happening inside her. He gave her water, holding her head up gently so she could drink. Most of it spilled down her chin, but some of it went down. She swallowed weakly, her golden eyes opening for just a moment before closing again. She was somewhere between sleep and death, and Jake was not sure which way she would go. His shelter was small, just a converted cargo container from his broken ship. He had spent 3 years making it livable. There was a bed, a table, a stove for cooking, and a heating unit that kept the worst of the cold away. The walls were covered with things he had found or made, tools and supplies, and small items that reminded him of Earth. It was not much, but it was home. The heating unit was making strange sounds. Jake had repaired it many times over the years, and he knew every noise it made. This was a new sound, a grinding and clicking that made his stomach tight with worry. He checked the machine and found what he feared. One of the core components was failing. It would keep working for a while, maybe a few hours, but eventually it would stop. And when it stopped, the cold would come in. Jake looked at the alien woman on his bed. She was shivering now, her body trying to create warmth it did not have. He pulled the blanket higher over her shoulders, but it was not enough. On a normal night, the heating unit kept the shelter at a temperature that was cold but survivable. Tonight, with the unit failing, the temperature would drop below freezing. She would not survive that. Neither would he. He had one option. He did not like it, but he was a practical man. 3 years alone had taught him to do what was necessary, not what was comfortable. Jake gathered every blanket, every piece of fabric, every coat and shirt he owned. He made a pile on the bed, layer after layer of warmth. Then he took off his boots and his outer coat and climbed onto the bed beside the alien woman. She stirred when he lay down next to her. Her eyes opened again, confused and unfocused. She tried to speak, but the words were just sounds, broken and weak. Jake pulled the blankets over both of them and moved closer until his body was pressed against hers. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you. The heater is broken and it's too cold. This is the only way we're going to make it through the night." She did not understand his words, but maybe she understood his voice. She stopped trying to pull away. Her body relaxed against his, accepting his warmth because she had no other choice. Outside, the wind was screaming. Jake could hear ice forming on the walls of the shelter. The heating unit made one final grinding noise and then went silent. The cold began to creep in almost immediately, pressing against them from all sides. Jake held the alien woman closer. Her skin was still hot with fever, which was actually helpful now. They were keeping each other alive, her fever and his body heat combining to create a small pocket of warmth beneath the blankets. He did not sleep. He could not. He lay there in the darkness, listening to her breathing, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. It was faster than a human heartbeat, a quick rhythm that reminded him of a bird. He wondered what her name was. He wondered if she had a family waiting for her somewhere among the stars. He wondered if she would live until morning. The alien woman dreamed. Jake could tell because she moved and made sounds in her sleep, words in her strange language that he could not understand. Sometimes she sounded scared. Sometimes she sounded sad. Once, she reached out and grabbed his arm, holding on tight like she was afraid of falling. Jake did not pull away. He let her hold him. The hours passed slowly. The cold grew worse, pressing in on them like a living thing. Frost formed on the inside of the walls. Jake's breath made clouds in the air, and the tip of his nose grew numb. But under the blankets, pressed against the alien woman, he was warm enough to survive. Just before dawn, she woke up. Her golden eyes opened and looked directly into his. They were only inches apart, their faces close enough that he could see the strange patterns in her irises, swirls of gold and amber that seemed to move like liquid. She stared at him for a long moment, and Jake saw understanding slowly enter her eyes. She knew where she was. She knew what had happened. "Hello," Jake said quietly. She blinked. Her mouth moved, and a single word came out, rough and broken but clearly in his language. "Hello." Jake smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in months. "You speak common?" She nodded slowly. "Little." "Learn for—" She struggled to find the words. "For travel." "You crashed," Jake said. "Your ship came down in the mountains. I found you and brought you here." She looked around the shelter, taking in the small space, the frozen walls, the pile of blankets covering them both. Her eyes came back to him, questioning. "The heater broke," Jake explained. "It was too cold. This was the only way to keep us both alive." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You saved me. I tried. Why?" It was a simple question, but Jake did not have a simple answer. He thought about it while she watched him with those strange golden eyes. "Because you were dying," he finally said. "And I could help." She studied his face like she was trying to read something written there. Whatever she found seemed to satisfy her. She nodded once, then closed her eyes again. Her body relaxed against his, and her breathing slowed. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome," Jake said. Outside, the sun was rising. The first rays of light came through the small window and fell across the bed. The temperature would climb now, slowly returning to something survivable. They had made it through the night. Jake watched the alien woman sleep. Her fever seemed less now, and her breathing was stronger. She would live. He did not know what would happen next, how she would get home, or what her people would do when they found her here with a human. But for now, none of that mattered. For now, they were both alive, and that was enough. He closed his eyes and let himself rest. The warmth under the blankets was comfortable now, almost pleasant. He had not been this close to another living being in 3 years. He had forgotten how good it felt to not be alone. Jake slept, and for the first time in a long time, he did not dream of being lost. The alien woman's name was Yelvara. She told Jake this on the second day, when her fever had broken and she could sit up without pain. She was still weak, and her arm was still broken. But she was alive and getting stronger. Jake had fixed the heating unit that morning, replacing the broken part with a piece he had been saving for emergencies. The shelter was warm again, and he had made soup from dried vegetables and meat. Yelvara had looked at the soup with suspicion at first, but hunger won over caution. She ate slowly, learning to use the metal spoon with her one good hand. "This world," she said between bites. "What is called?" "I don't know if it has an official name," Jake said. "I just call it the Rock. It's not on any human maps that I know of." "Frontier world," Yelvara said, nodding. "No claim. Empty. Mostly empty. There are animals, plants. Nothing intelligent besides me." He paused. "And now you." She looked at him with those golden eyes. Jake was starting to get used to them, but they still made him feel strange, like she could see things about him that he could not see himself. "How long you here?" she asked. 3 years. My ship broke down. The engine core cracked, and I didn't have the parts to fix it. I sent out a distress signal, but no one ever came. 3 years alone. She said it like she was testing the idea, trying to understand what that meant. Human live alone 3 years? This human did. Jake shrugged. It wasn't easy. There were times I wanted to give up, but I kept going. That's what humans do. Yelver was quiet for a while, thinking about his words. Then she asked, "Why you save me?" "Human and Volanthi have no treaty. No alliance. We are strangers." Jake had thought about this question a lot since he first asked it. The answer he gave her now was the same one he had found in himself, because it was the right thing to do. You were hurt and alone, and I could help. That's all that mattered. "On my world," Yelvara said slowly, "we are taught that other species cannot be trusted. We are taught that humans are primitive, young, without culture or honor. Children playing in the stars." Jake felt a flash of anger at her words, but he pushed it down. "And what do you think now?" She looked around the shelter, at the tools he had made, the systems he had built, the 3 years of survival written in every patch and repair. Then she looked at him, at the man who had carried her through a frozen forest and kept her alive through the coldest night. "I think my teachers were wrong," she said. The days passed slowly. Yelvara healed, and as she healed, she talked. Jake learned about the Volanthi Empire, a civilization that had existed for thousands of years. They ruled over 100 worlds and considered themselves the most advanced species in their region of space. They had seen many other species rise and fall, and they had learned to be careful with their trust. The ship that crashed was called the Grace. It had been attacked by rebels, enemies of the Empress who wanted to overthrow the government and take power for themselves. The rebels were growing stronger, and the Empire was worried. That was why Yelvara had been traveling in secret, on a mission that she would not explain in detail. Jake also learned about Yelvara herself, though she was careful about what she shared. She was young by Volanthi standards, only about 90 years old, which was considered early adulthood. She had been raised in the capital, educated in politics and diplomacy, trained to serve the Empire. But she had always been curious about the universe beyond her own people, about the other species that lived among the stars. "I read about humans," she admitted one evening. "Before this journey, I was curious about your kind." "And what did you read?" Jake asked. "That you are new to space, that you multiply quickly and spread everywhere, that you fight each other as much as you fight others." She paused. "That you are unpredictable." Jake laughed. "That's probably all true. But the books did not say that you would carry a dying stranger through the cold. They did not say that you would share your warmth and your food with an alien you never met." Yelvara tilted her head, studying him. "They did not say that you would be kind. Kindness isn't something you can put in a book," Jake said. "It's a choice people make. Some humans are kind. Some aren't. I like to think I am most of the time." "You are," Yelvara said simply. That night, Yelvara asked Jake to tell her about Earth. He talked for hours, describing the blue oceans and green forests, the cities that reached toward the sky, and the small towns where everyone knew each other's names. He told her about his childhood, growing up in a place called Oregon, where the rain fell soft and steady and the trees grew so tall they seemed to touch the clouds. Yelvara listened with her eyes half closed, like she was trying to imagine everything he described. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "I would like to see this Earth," she finally said. "Maybe someday you will." She smiled, the first real smile he had seen from her. It transformed her face, making her look younger and less serious. "Maybe someday?" Jake smiled back. He had almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone to talk to, someone who listened and responded and cared about his words. 3 years of silence had made him forget how much he needed connection. He did not know what would happen when Yelvara's people came for her. He did not know if they would be grateful or angry, if they would see him as a hero or a threat. But right now, in this small shelter on a frozen world, none of that mattered. Right now, he had a friend. And that was more than he had dared to hope for in a very long time. The twin moons rose outside the window, casting silver light across the floor. Yelvara was already asleep on the bed, her breathing slow and peaceful. Jake sat by the stove, watching the fire and thinking about the future. Whatever came next, he would face it. That was what humans did. They faced whatever came and found a way through. He just hoped that whatever came would not take this strange, unlikely friendship away from him. On the 5th day, Yelvara found her beacon. Jake had brought a few items from the crash site, things he thought might be useful or valuable. Among them was a small metal device that he had assumed was broken. He was wrong. Yelvara held the device in her good hand and pressed a hidden switch. A soft blue light began to pulse from within it, steady and calm like a heartbeat. "Emergency beacon," she explained. "Send signal across great distance. My people will come." Jake felt something twist in his chest. He had known this moment would come, but he had not expected it to feel like this. How long? 3 days, maybe 4. Depends on where nearest ship is. 3 days. After 3 years of being alone, he only had 3 more days with her. They did not talk about what would happen when the ship arrived. Instead, they spent their time together, walking in the forest when the weather was warm enough, sitting by the fire when it was not. Jake showed Yelvara the things he had learned about this world, the safe plants and the dangerous animals, the hidden valleys where hot springs bubbled up from the ground. Yelvara taught him some words in her language. Her voice made sounds that were difficult for human mouths to copy, but Jake tried his best. She laughed at his pronunciation, a light and musical sound that made him smile even when he was getting the words wrong. On the 2nd night after activating the beacon, they sat outside watching the stars. The sky on this world was clear and dark, filled with more stars than Jake had ever seen from Earth. Somewhere out there, Yelvara's people were coming for her. Somewhere out there, his own people were living their lives without any idea that he was still alive. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said, double quotes, "Yes. Who are you really?" "I know you're Velanthi. I know you were on some kind of secret mission. But you've been careful not to tell me everything." "Why?" Yelvara was silent for a long moment. The starlight reflected in her golden eyes, making them shine like liquid metal. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. "I did not tell you because I was afraid it would change how you see me." "What do you mean?" She turned to face him directly. "My full name is Yelvara Kethani. My mother is the Empress of the Velanthi." Jake stared at her. He had suspected she was important, someone with rank or power, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. "You're a princess?" "Youngest daughter of the Empress. Third in line for the throne." He laughed. He could not help it. Here he was, a stranded salvage worker with nothing but a broken ship and a metal box. And he had been sharing his bed with alien royalty. Yelvara frowned. "You laugh. This is funny to you?" "No, it's just..." Jake shook his head, still smiling. "It's absurd. I'm nobody. I'm less than nobody. And you're the daughter of an empress." "You are not nobody," Yelvara said firmly. "You saved my life. You treated me with kindness when you had no reason to. That makes you more than most people I have known, regardless of their title." Jake's smile faded. He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing past the silver skin and golden eyes to the person beneath. She was young and uncertain, far from home and facing an unknown future. In many ways, she was just as lost as he was. "Does it change things?" she asked quietly. "Knowing who I am?" Jake thought about it. He thought about the nights they had spent talking, the stories they had shared, the friendship that had grown between them. He thought about how much her presence had meant to him after 3 years of silence. "No," he said finally. "It doesn't change anything. You're still Yelvara. You're still the person I carried out of that wreck. Titles don't mean much when you're sharing a blanket to survive the cold." She smiled, and the relief in her eyes was clear. "My advisors would not understand that. They believe titles are everything." "Then your advisors are wrong." They sat in comfortable silence after that, watching the stars move slowly across the sky. Jake did not ask about the future, and Yelvara did not offer any promises. Some things were better left unsaid. On the third night, Yelvara came to him with a request. "When my ship arrives," she said, "they will want to take me away immediately. They will be suspicious of you, maybe hostile. I want you to know that I will protect you. I can take care of myself. I know you can. But my people do not know humans. They may see you as a threat." She reached out and touched his arm with her good hand. "I will not let them harm you. You have my word." Jake looked down at her hand on his arm. Her silver skin was warm now, healthy, nothing like the cold touch of the dying woman he had found in the wreckage. He covered her hand with his own. "Thank you. It is I who should thank you. You saved my life. You showed me kindness when you had no reason to. You showed me that everything I was taught about humans was wrong." She paused, her golden eyes serious. "I will not forget that, ever." They stood there for a moment, hands touching, eyes locked. Something passed between them, something that neither of them could put into words. Then Yelvara pulled back, and the moment was gone. "You should rest," she said. "Tomorrow will be a difficult day." Jake nodded. He wanted to say more, to ask her what would happen after she left, if he would ever see her again. But the words stuck in his throat, and the moment passed. That night, they slept on opposite sides of the shelter for the first time since she arrived. The heating unit was working fine now, and there was no need to share warmth. But Jake lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of her breathing. Tomorrow, the ship would come. Tomorrow, everything would change. He closed his eyes and tried to find peace in the darkness. But peace was hard to find when you knew that morning would bring goodbye. The ship came at dawn. Jake heard it before he saw it, a deep humming sound that shook the walls of his shelter and rattled the tools hanging on their hooks. He stepped outside and looked up at the sky, and his breath caught in his throat. The vessel was enormous, a warship the size of a city block, its hull gleaming silver and blue in the morning light. It descended slowly through the clouds, and as it came lower, Jake could see weapon ports along its sides, dozens of them, enough firepower to destroy a planet. This was the power of the Volanthi Empire. This was what Yelvara's family commanded. Smaller ships began to separate from the main vessel, landing craft that screamed down toward the valley. Jake counted 6 of them, each one carrying soldiers who would be prepared for anything. His hand went to the knife at his belt, then dropped away. Against this, a knife was useless. Yelvara came out to stand beside him. She was wearing a clean robe that Jake had made from spare fabric, and her arm was still in its splint, but she stood tall and proud, every inch a princess. "Do not be afraid," she said quietly. "Remember when I promised." "I'm not afraid," Jake lied. The first landing craft touched down about 50 meters from the shelter. Soldiers poured out, tall Volanthi warriors in gleaming armor, carrying weapons that pulsed with energy. They formed a protective circle around the craft, their eyes scanning the area for threats. An officer stepped forward. He was older than the others, with elaborate violet markings on his face that spoke of high rank. His golden eyes found Yelvara, and his expression shifted from alertness to shock. "Princess Yelvara." He dropped to one knee, and every soldier behind him did the same. "We thought you were dead. The Empress has been searching for you since the attack." "I survived," Yelvara said calmly, "thanks to this man." The officer's eyes moved to Jake, and all the warmth vanished from his face. "A human? His name is Jake Collins. He found me in the wreckage of my ship. He carried me through the cold, treated my wounds, and kept me alive until you arrived. He is to be treated with full honor. Your Highness, with respect, he could be a spy or he is not a spy." Yelvara's voice was sharp, filled with authority that Jake had never heard from her before. "He is a friend, and I will not hear another word against him." The officer hesitated, clearly unhappy, but he did not argue further. He stood and gestured to his soldiers. "Secure the princess. Bring the human." Jake felt hands grab his arms, not gently. 2 soldiers lifted him off his feet and started carrying him toward one of the landing craft. He did not resist. There was no point. "Carefully," Yelvara called out. "Any harm that comes to him will be answered for." The soldiers exchanged glances, but loosened their grip slightly. Jake was set down inside the craft and strapped into a seat. A moment later, Yelvara was beside him, and the doors closed. The flight to the main ship took only minutes. Jake watched through a small window as the valley where he had spent 3 years of his life shrank to a tiny spot and then disappeared entirely. He felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. That place had been his prison, but it had also been his home. Inside the warship, everything was vast and strange. The corridors were high and wide, built for beings taller than humans. The walls were covered with writing in the Volanthi language, symbols that Jake could not read. Crew members stopped and stared as he passed, their golden eyes curious and suspicious in equal measure. They were taken to a large room with a view screen on one wall. The screen flickered to life, and suddenly Jake was looking at the face of the Empress herself. She was old, impossibly old, with silver skin that had faded to almost white and violet markings that covered her entire face. But her eyes were the same gold as Yelvara's. and they burned with an intelligence that made Jake want to look away. "Mother," Yalvara said, bowing her head. "My daughter." The Empress's voice was deep and powerful, carrying the weight of centuries. "You are alive. I had prepared myself to mourn you. I would have died if not for this man." The Empress's eyes moved to Jake. He felt like an insect under a microscope, small and unimportant. But he did not look away. He had survived 3 years alone on a hostile world. He would not be intimidated by a face on a screen. "A human," the Empress said. "Tell me why I should not have you executed for touching my daughter." "Mother!" Yelvara stepped forward, her voice rising. "He saved my life. He kept me warm when I would have frozen, treated my wounds when I would have died. Without him, I would be nothing but bones in the wreckage of my ship. And what does he want in return?" Jake spoke before Yelvara could answer. "Nothing. I didn't save her because I wanted a reward. I saved her because she was dying and I could help. That's all." The Empress was silent for a long moment, her ancient eyes studying Jake's face. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I see. Perhaps humans are not as primitive as we believed. That is what I have been trying to tell you, Mother." Yelvara took a deep breath. "I believe this man represents something important. Humanity is new to the stars, but they have qualities that we lack: compassion, adaptability, a willingness to help strangers without asking for anything in return. With the rebellion growing stronger, we need allies who can surprise us. You propose an alliance with humanity? I'd propose that we start with Jake Collins. Let him come to our world. Let him be an ambassador for his people." Yelvara turned to look at Jake, her golden eyes meeting his. "If he is willing." Jake stared at her. "An ambassador. A representative of humanity in an alien empire. It was impossible, absurd, completely insane. But then again, so was surviving alone on a frozen world for 3 years. So was carrying a dying alien through the night. So was sleeping beside a princess to keep them both alive. I have a choice?" he asked. "Of course," Yalvara said. "You can return to your world and wait for rescue that may never come. Or you can come with me and help build something new." Jake looked at the Empress on the screen, ancient and powerful. He looked at the soldiers surrounding him, tall and armored. He looked at Yelvara, the woman who had been a stranger just days ago and was now offering him a future he never could have imagined. He thought about his shelter in the valley, the 3 years of loneliness, the endless nights of silence. He thought about Earth, so far away that he could not even find it among the stars. And he thought about what Yelvara had said, that humans were unpredictable, that they faced whatever came and found a way through. "Okay," he said. "I'll come with you." Yelvara smiled, and it was like the sun coming out from behind the clouds. The Empress nodded once, a gesture of acceptance that carried more weight than words. "Very well," the Empress said. "The human will be treated as a guest. We will see what comes of this experiment." The screen went dark. Yelvara turned to Jake, her eyes shining. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For trusting me. For taking a chance." Jake shook his head. "You took a chance first. You trusted me when you had no reason to. I'm just returning the favor." She reached out and took his hand, her silver fingers intertwining with his. "Whatever happens next, we face it together." "Together," Jake agreed. Outside the view screen, the stars stretched out in every direction, endless and unknown. The warship began to move, carrying them toward a future neither of them could predict. But for the first time in 3 years, Jake was not afraid of what came next. He had a friend beside him, and together they would find their way. That was what humans did. And maybe, just maybe, it was what they could teach the Volanthi as well. The ship jumped into hyperspace, and the stars became streaks of light, and Jake Collins, Once a lonely survivor on a forgotten world, began the greatest adventure of his life.